up until this point, we've been primarily concerned with how to query data using GraphQL. But of course, GraphQL can also be used to write data. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how to write data by using what GraphQL refers to as mutations. So just like query, mutation is another built-in type which we can specify type definitions for. So in our schema, we can add something called a type mutation. And in here, we can specify the functions that we want to add. So for example, I am now going to add a new mutation function, which is going to be called make user, where we want to pass in an ID of an integer, because that's required, and a name, which is also required. And this needs to be a string, and let's make both of these fields required, and this should return a user. Okay, so if we've added a mutation in our schema with a type definition, we also need to add a resolver function for it, because we need to tell it how to actually do the insertion. So what we're going to do is in the resolver map, create a new property called mutation, and we're going to specify a method on this object, which is going to be called make user. So make user, and it has parent, and then from the arguments we can extract the ID and the name, and then this function is going to construct a new user. It will take the ID and the name, and what I'm going to do, because we still work with static data, just call users.push and then push that user and then return the user itself. So we push it to the users list, this user variable, and then I return that. Okay, and that should be pretty much it. So let's go ahead and start the application. Open up the playground, let's hit refresh, and let's see how we can create a mutation. So I'm going to just comment this out because we may be needing this later. So in order to specify a mutation, so in order to write or insert data, you need to specify the keyword mutation, open close parentheses, and in here you can then specify the name of the method that we created, and that's make user. That requires an ID, so let's give it 4, and a name, which should be, let's say, John. And also for make user, we must have a selection of subfields as the error message is suggesting. So let's then return the name of this inserted user. So let's run this, and we have make user name John, which is fair enough. Let's now run an actual query. Let's just run a query for the user's ID and name, and let's see if we get this new user. There we go. So we have inserted a new object into the users array that we have. So this is just mimicking, of course, how to do data insertion, because we are using a static data, we use a static array, but we push a new item, a new element to that array. And similarly, we can of course delete data as well. So I'm going to create a remove user method that is going to accept an ID, which should be an int, and we should always provide that, and it's going to return a new scalar type that we haven't seen before, but it's a very simple one. It's Boolean. Okay, so this is true or false. And of course, we need to now create a resolver function as well. So we had remove a user, and we have the parent, and let's extract the ID. And what we need to do is find that particular element in our array and remove the entire object. So what I'm going to do is create a variable called found, give it a value of false, and I'm going to do users.filter to filter through my data set, and I'm going to say if user.id is the same as the ID that gets passed in, found is going to be true, otherwise I return the user. And if found, I'm going to say, because we need to return a Boolean value, so I'm going to say return true, otherwise return false. So what's happening here? So with filter, we essentially say if the user ID matches the ID, we just change the variable, but we're not returning the entire object, the entire user object. But if the user ID doesn't match, then we return the user object. And what we need to do, remember, this users.filter is going to return us a new array of users. We need to just reassign that to the existing users variable. Now, if you were to run this, and in fact I can probably save this and I don't get the error, but what's going to happen if we delete a user is that users is declared as a constant, so our code is going to complain. So let's recreate this require statement using the let keyword. Okay, so let's save and let's run a test again. So what I'm going to do is insert a user. Okay, so that worked just like before. Let's do a query. So we have John with ID 4 here, and let's change our mind and bring up another mutation, and probably I forgot to refresh the interface, so let's quickly do that so that we have access to the methods. Here we go, remove user ID number 4. And we don't need to do anything else because this returns a Boolean value. So let's hit this play button, run the code, and as you can see, we have remove user set to be true. So if I now run another query, then you will see that John is in fact gone from the list of users. And what happens if I run this mutation again? Of course, now I have a false value because I haven't removed any element from my array. So as a challenge, or a homework, or a task, if you will, what I would like you to do is to create 2 additional mutations, one to create a car and the other one to remove a car. So just use the knowledge that you acquired now, and you should be able to do this in a very, very easy way.